Hello, this is Gallifreyan Jedi, and I would like to welcome you to my YouTube channel for what is my first video blog for the year 2015. And yes, it's been a long wait over this month for my first video blog for this year, but I think it will be worth the wait. For today, I'm going to begin a new series known as Star Wars Mythology and Doctor Who Mythology. And what I'm going to be doing in this new series is I'm going to be taking particular topics from both Star Wars and Doctor Who and exploring the mythology behind those particular topics, taking the various topics and particular topics from both Star Wars and Doctor Who and exploring in depth the details of the mythology of those particular topics from both those franchises. The lore, studying the lore and studying the concepts and the mythology, getting into more depth so I can get more into the creme de la creme of what I really love about these franchises, these science fiction franchises. And what my tentative plan to do is I'm going to alternate, at least try to alternate each month between a Star Wars mythology blog and a Doctor Who mythology blog, so that will, kind of even it out and, give me time, to have some equal blogs and on both Star Wars and Doctor Who. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself and just rambling on about that. But that's just tentatively. Doesn't mean that I'm going to keep to that absolute. I want to be flexible with my blogs, but I'm going to try to alternate between a Star Wars mythology blog and a Doctor Who mythology blog to even it out. So I'll, because keep in mind my YouTube channel theme is primarily for Star Wars and Doctor Who. So that's what I want to, give equal enough time for both those those franchises to talk about the mythology of both those franchises, both those science fiction stories. But for today, I want to start off with a topic on Star Wars mythology. I want to do it on Star Wars mythology. And, let's just say, I think the topic that would be most important, or the thing that I should start off with for Star Wars mythology, that would, the foundation of Star Wars lore, of the mythology of that universe, would be the galaxy. So today, my topic will be Star Wars mythology number 1, titled The Galaxy, which we will study the galaxy. And I'm going to go over and talk about what the Star Wars galaxy is and go into the details, and also list various planets for each section of the Star Wars galaxy. It's not going to be exhaustive, but I'm going to try to do as many as I can for this blog. But essentially, I just want to give you an overview of what the Star Wars galaxy is all about. And that will, be a springboard, that will be a foundation for basically the rest of all other Star Wars blogs that I will do on Star Wars mythology. So I'm trying to think of if there's anything else important I should say about the foundation of what I'm planning to do with this blog, but other than the fact of laying the foundation for what the Star Wars galaxy is all about. Let's see. If I think that's pretty much it. So with me saying that, let's get down to talking about this. Let's get down to talking about what the Star Wars galaxy is all about. Now keep in mind, like I said before, that this is going to be a basic overview. It's not going to be exhaustive, and I'm not going to be going into every single detail about every single planet and sector of the Star Wars galaxy, because there will be topics in this that you might want to learn more about, which I will leave for later blogs to explore in depth various topics, because this is going to be a huge topic. So I'm going to try to do it sort of like like what you have with a survey course. Just go over some of the basics of everything, but not extreme details with any one particular topic. So hopefully that will help with the concept of where I'm trying to go with this blog. Okay, let's start off with the Star Wars mythology. Number one, the galaxy. I think the best place to start with studying Star Wars galaxy is to study our own galaxy. Let me cover some basics about our own galaxy so you know what a galaxy is. Keep in mind, a galaxy is a cluster of stars. It's a sector where it's a cluster of stars, where a cluster of stars are together. So I think it's important that we study what galaxies are and start off with our own galaxy to give you a little bit of foundation what the Star Wars galaxy is all about. Okay, let's start off with this. Scientists have theorized that there are millions of galaxies within the known universe, along with trillions of stars inhabiting them, and potentially billions of planets circling those stars. The Earth, okay, let's start off with our galaxy. The Earth is the third planet in our star system of 8 planets that circle the star of Sol that is located within Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is our home galaxy. And, it's gotten that name because of people in the past who have observed, have given that term Milky Way because it looks like sort of like a milky stream or a milky star system. So we've through our observations we've referred to it as our home galaxy as the Milky Way galaxy. Now our planet, our star system, is within our star system is more so closer to the outer edge of that galaxy rather than inner galaxy. So that kind of gives you an idea of where our home world is at. But Earth is the third planet within a star system of 8 planets. And I say 8 instead of 9 because most people know now, in year 2015, that Pluto, which was the 9th planet, assumed the 9th planet, has been debunked as a planet. So really we have 8 planets in our star system. Now keep in mind, when I say star system, what I mean is a star, and it's is a star in a system of planets that rotate around that particular star. And our star is named Sol. That's where we get the term solar system. The name of our star, our sun, is Sol. And there's 8 planets. Our 4 terrestrial planets, that means planets with an atmosphere and solid ground. Those are the inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. And then the 4 gas giants, which are huge, which I refer to as a failed star because they lack the mass and other material, whatever, to turn into a star. But they're gas giants: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Those are the 4 gas giants of the outer planets. But essentially that is our star system, our sun, Sol, and the 8 planets that circle that star. And of course, as we know, Earth is the only one, as we know it, of today that can support life. But that's located in the outer edges of the Milky Way galaxy. Let's go on. The Milky Way galaxy is a stellar disk. That's, if you look at the perspective from the outside of the Milky Way, it's a stellar disk. Looks like a stellar disk. Okay, and here's the details of what the Milky Way galaxy, our galaxy, is. It's approximately 100,000 light years in diameter. Now, a light year, keep in mind, a light year is the distance that light travels in 1 year. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second, so you would have to do the math of what that would be. The astronomical number of miles. If you're talking about 186,000 miles a second, you'd have to. That's a huge number that you would calculate of how many miles it would be for that light would travel in 1 year. So that's why we call it a light year, the distance that light travels in 1 year. So our Milky Way galaxy is 100,000 light years in diameter, and is on average about 1,000 light years thick. The Milky Way contains at least 1 billion planets and between 200 to 400 billion stars. That's roughly the estimate of what astronomers and astrophysicists say that our Milky Way galaxy is. So keep that in mind. 200, 400 billion stars, potentially 100 billion planets. And of course, as we know, we haven't explored the galaxy yet, except for our own star system. Earth is the only one that can support life as we know it. But now, since we dealt with the real science, let's go on to the fictional science, or the fictional universe of Star Wars. The setting for the Star Wars galaxy is in a galaxy far, far away. Remember, in the text scroll at the beginning of every Star Wars movie, we see in a galaxy far, far away. Okay, meaning that millions of light years away from our own Milky Way galaxy. Keep in mind, it's another galaxy. Star Wars galaxy is another galaxy, not the Milky Way galaxy. It's in another galaxy, millions of light years away from our own Milky Way galaxy. There exists a galaxy in which billions of stars inhabit, in which many of the star systems have planets that can sustain carbon-based biological life. Keep in mind, carbon-based life forms are what we are about. So basically everything that we know on this world is carbon-based, from human beings to animals to insects to plants. It's all carbon-based life forms. Within this galaxy, spanning throughout several thousand star systems and planets, there exists an interplanetary intelligent and technological advanced civilization, whose citizens consist of various multiple intelligent sentient races. Some of the races that make up this interplanetary civilization it's not an exhaustive number, but it includes this following, or humans. I put humans as first, and I'll explain why. Now the rest I'm going, after humanity, I'm going to explain, I'm going to go through a list of alien races, but in alphabetical order. But this is not an exhaustive, this is just a sampling. Aqualish, Biths, Bothans, Chiss, Devronians, Dugs, Doros, Ewoks, Geonosians, Gungans, Hutts, Ithorians, Jawas, Kamenians, Cletonians, Moncamilarians, Moons, Nemodians, Nyctos, Pawns, Corns, Rhodians, Solstans, Trigrata, Tidarians, Trandoshians, Tuscan Raiders, Twi'leks, Ognaughts, Umbarans, Weequays, Wookiees, Zabraks, and Zygerians. And sampling of the various alien races that inhabit the Star Wars galaxy along with humans. And there are many other races that would take too long to list. But anyway, let's go on. In the Star Wars mythology, humans are the predominant race in the galaxy, as they tend to have a civilized outpost or settlement in every known civilized star system in the galaxy. But in spite of that, humans are not the only intelligent sentient race in the galaxy. For the majority of the alien races that I mentioned and listed above are also just as intelligent and sentient as humans are, and are also considered to be equal citizens of their civilization in their galaxy, with full-fledged rights, at least under the democratic government of the Galactic Republic. Keep in mind that I emphasize under the democracy of the Republic rather than the Empire, because when the Empire took over under Palpatine, not all races and people had the same equal rights. There was a lot of persecution and oppression, especially with other races that were not considered equal to humans, or whom Palpatine looked down upon. Also, in addition, both human and alien civilizations of the galaxy have developed an advanced technology of artificial intelligence, and have used it to create a wide assortment of different kinds of droids. Now, I'm not going to go too much into droids specifically today, but that will be a topic for a future blog. Okay, now let's get into the details of what the Star Wars galaxy, just like I did with the Milky Way galaxy. Let's go with the Star Wars galaxy and describe that and give you the details. Okay, the Star Wars galaxy is a stellar disk very much similar to the Milky Way. You've seen the Milky Way, that circular stellar disk, the way the circular stellar disk is for the Milky Way. Well, the Star Wars galaxy is pretty much the same thing. It's very, very similar. It's very similar in the same shape of the Milky Way galaxy, that stellar disk. Okay, and here are the specific details, and it's approximately 120,000 light years in diameter. Keep in mind, remember, light year is the distance that light travels in 1 year, and it says here the details that it's that the Star Wars galaxy is approximately 120,000 light years in diameter. So we go back to the Milky Way. The Milky Way is 100,000 light years in diameter. Star Wars galaxy is 120,000 light years in diameter. Pretty much the same size, except the Star Wars galaxy seems to be a little bit bigger, 20,000 light years bigger than our own Milky Way galaxy, according to the mythology of Star Wars. Another way to break it down is 37,000 parsecs. Now, that's important because parsecs are used in the Star Wars movies and Clone Wars and stuff like that as a measuring instrument. A parsec, to break down a parsec, what it is. A parsec is 3.258 light years. So when they say one parsec equals to 3.25 light years. It's just like comparing yards to feet. A yard is 3 feet, averages out to 3 feet. So a parsec equals out to 3.258 light years in distance. Okay, and they predict, their own scientists predict, that it's approximately, Star Wars galaxy is approximately 13 billion years old, which would probably be close to the age of our universe, of our galaxy. 13 billion. Milky Way is probably 13 billion or close to it, or 10 billion years old. But the Star Wars galaxy, let's just say this: Star Wars galaxy is 13 billion years old. That's the age of our galaxy. A black hole exists at the center of their galaxy. Okay, and at the center of their galaxy. Okay, let's see. Let me get on here. Little tidbits of information about the Star Wars galaxy. There's a black hole that exists at the center of the galaxy. Also, the galaxy was orbited. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be very important information. The galaxy was orbited by 7 satellite galaxies. That's interesting. 7 satellite galaxies. I'll make some comments about that a little bit later. Okay, now these are the 7 galaxies, or sampling of some of these the galaxies the satellite galaxies that I'm referring to. Companion Uruk, also known as the Rishi Maze. Rishi Maze is something that's very familiar. It was mentioned in episode 2, Attack of the Clones. That's the first one. Companion Besh, also known as Fire Fist. Companion Kresh, through Grek. So I guess that last part is just giving you a sampling of many of the not exhaustive, but the names of the satellite galaxies that are within the Star Wars, that surround the Star Wars galaxy. Let's see. Okay. However, most of the companion satellite galaxies were described as having ancient, metal-rich remnants of stars and not much life. There was also a hyperspace disturbance beyond the edge of the galaxy that prevented hyperspace routes outside the galaxy. The galaxy had nearly 200 globular clusters. Okay, now let's go on to some other details. Hyperspace made it possible within the galaxy to have an enormous and diverse civilization. Keep in mind the hyperspace drive, the hyperdrive propulsion system was one of their greatest technological advances in their universe. It made space travel more practical, made it possible to explore the galaxy. Because prior to the time that the hyperdrive propulsion system, space travel was pretty much what it is for us today. You can go up into space, but you can't really go too far because it would take too long. I mean, it takes 6 months to get to Mars. It takes almost 10 years to get outside of our solar system. So traveling the galaxy is not too practical because your ships cannot go far in a short distance of time. But with the hyperdrive propulsion system, that made that possible. And they've had that the citizens have had that technology for almost 25,000 years in their galaxy. There are approximately here let's go on to more details about this galaxy. There are approximately 400 billion stars in the Star Wars galaxy, and around 180 billion of these had planets that could support life. 10% of those planets developed life, while sentient life developed in 1 to 1,000. We're talking about the fraction here. 1 to 1,000 of those, about 20 million. So essentially what they're saying is that about 20 million planets had developed or evolved, intelligent life had evolved and on those planets, and 20 million of those planets could sustain the carbon-based intelligent life forms as we know it. There were 7.1 billion true inhabitable stars within the galaxy. That means there were stars that had planets circulating them, either one or more than one, multiple, that could support life as we know it within the galaxy. And about 3.2 billion habitable star systems. However, it was estimated there were about 1 billion of these star systems were actually populated. During the days of the Galactic Empire, more than 69 million systems met the requirements for imperial representation, and 1.75 million planets were considered full member worlds. The population of nearly 70 million star systems that the Empire was responsible for amounted to more than 100 quadrillion beings. It's a lot of living beings in the galaxy, because you're talking about a very populated galaxy. Okay, now, interesting, we're going to talk a little bit about humans here in the Star Wars galaxy. When humans discovered the hyperspace travel, they invented the hyperdrive propulsion system. Humans discovered hyperspace travel and met other sentient races. Where several worlds and species came to know each other, they formed a loose affiliation they accepted as common law and courtesy, and the Galactic Public was formed and became the official galactic government. So think about that. Humans were at one time, just like we are, were isolated before they started exploring space. They were isolated, but once they discovered or invented the hyperdrive propulsion system, they had discovered other alien races, and they with discovering these intelligent alien races, they derived a common interest in sharing of knowledge of cultures and technology and currency and economy, and eventually those alien races were exploring the galaxy with humanity, and they became 25,000 years prior to the movies. They became known as the Galactic Republic, and the Galactic Republic was the official galactic government. It was a democratic government, which I will do an entire blog sometime in the future on what the Galactic Republic is. And it was a democratic freedom, limited autonomy within the races, amongst the races and civilizations. But they formed the Galactic Republic, and that was the official government for 25,000 years of galactic history. By the time of the Clone Wars, contact had been established with two small galaxies orbiting the galaxy, the Rishi Maze and the Fire Fist. The intergalactic banking clan had influence as far as these locations. So somehow there was some intelligent races or whatever. There was some type of contact made with the few living beings that were within the galaxy of the Rishi Maze and the Fire Fist. Now here's something that's interesting. We're talking about the exploration within the galaxy and also the satellite galaxies, but let's talk about outside the galaxy, other galaxies. The Extragalactic Society was an organization devoted to the search for life outside the galaxy. During the last days of the Republic, the Proto-Sogi leader, Senator Greyblebes, sent an expedition to another galaxy, but all information about the outcome of this endeavor remains unknown. Now I'm going to do, in another month or two, I'm going to be doing an entire blog on that theme, so I don't want to go too much and spoil what that blog's going to be, but some interesting theories about that, which is interesting. But also, we talk about the sort of like the Star Trek theme, exploring space. Star Wars had that. I just mentioned here the Galactic Society. We know prior to the Clone Wars, we had the Outbound Flight Project, which is mentioned in the EU, where Jedi were supposed to leave the galaxy and explore life in other galaxies. Try to travel to other galaxies. But I'm going to leave that for another blog, which will be interesting. How about races that have visited, other races that have visited the Star Wars galaxy? Well, there have been some, but the only one I'm going to really mention is the best known extragalactic aliens were the Yuuzhan Vong, who almost managed to destroy the galactic civilization that while it was just recovering from the Galactic Civil War. Now, the Yuuzhan Vong are EU legends, and I thought that it's important to mention, even though that the expanded universe, which I've done another blog on, which a lot of people are commenting on, which I'm very happy about, but there's still that controversy on what we can consider canon and non-canon, in spite of the fact that Lucasfilm under Disney now has declared, put that under Legends, which the best case scenario is the EU Legends is Star Wars history, future history, shall we say, of in an alternate universe. Worst case scenario, which I'm sure some people are wanting to take the position to take, is that they don't happen. They're just like fanzines, just stories, but they don't count worth anything. I don't take that position. I take closer to the first position. But anyway, I'm going to go on to talk about the various sectors in the Star Wars galaxy. And then each sector, what I'm going to do is, after I describe what the sector is, I'm going to describe some of the planets and give a little overview of some of the planets. Now, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list of planets. Some of the topics in these sectors, these various sectors in the Star Wars universe, and also the planets and the races, etc., etc., I probably will explore maybe in further detail in future blogs, depending on topics that I want to cover or interests that I would cover in those things. So this is not exhaustive, so please don't say, well, what about that planet? What about this planet? If I missed it, I apologize. If I missed certain things that you wanted to hear a little bit about, but hopefully I will cover a significant amount of each of the planets and each of the sections of the Star Wars galaxy. So I'll cover generically, hopefully, everything that's within these sectors and planets and sectors within the Star Wars galaxy. I will hopefully do somewhat of a job that gives justice to this topic. Okay, let's start off with Deep Core. That's the first one. Deep Core, okay, which is in the middle of the galaxy. That's at the heart of the galaxy. That's the Deep Core. At the very heart of the galaxy, the Deep Core was a region that spanned 7,000 light years and contained roughly 30 billion stars. Due to the gravitational pull of the vast number of stars, as well as the massive black hole, remember I mentioned the black hole that's in the middle of the galaxy, the massive black hole at the center, local space-time was severely warped, making hyperspace travel difficult at best. The region was thought to be almost inaccessible until Emperor Palpatine found several safe hyperspace lanes into that region. So we see that the advances that Palpatine had made, even though he's a tyrannical dictator, there are things that he invented that were very helpful, and that's not uncommon here, even here in reality, in our world. Tyrannical dictators are horrible, but they've been known to advance science in certain ways that are helpful. doesn't give them justification for their tyranny, but it's just interesting that they have produced some good within all their evil. The area remained an Imperial stronghold for almost 25 years after the Battle of Endor, which is interesting. Of course, I think some of that, with that statement, a lot of that would be stuff that you would get from the EU, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Now, the planets, there's not really too many planets that I can really, because even, you know, whether it be the movies or the Clone Wars series, or even the EU, there's not a lot of stories covered where either it's planets within the deep core. The only thing I can think of that I'd like to do some more research is, I think that if you've seen the Lost Missions of the Clone Wars for Season 6, the final 3-story arc with Yoda. Yoda goes to the planet, finds a planet at the heart of the galaxy, known as the heart of the galaxy. The spirit of Qui-Gon Jinn leads him to that planet. And that's the origin of life, or actually the origin, the planet with the origin of the Metachlorians are. Which I probably, when I do some more research on it, I'd like to maybe even do a blog on that. But Yoda finds that planet, and there was a Force priestess there and stuff like that. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but it's the only planet I can think of that's visited amongst the movies or the TV series where we see a planet inside deep core. But that's my theory. I want to do some more research before I confirm anything of that. But anyway, let's go on to the core. The core is very important. The core worlds, okay? The core. The core is the second region in the Star Wars galaxy. So think of it almost like an onion. You know, think of the Star Wars galaxy as an onion, just to give you a little bit of understanding of how this is. You know, is that, you know, you peel through layers and layers, you go down deeper and deeper. Well, each one, you know, is a circle within the galaxy, and that's the region. So the middle one, the center one, which I just mentioned, is the deep core. The next section, the main one, is the core worlds. The core, what they refer to as the core. Okay, the core worlds, an ancient region bordering the outlying areas of the deep core. The core worlds were some of the most prestigious, well-developed, well-known, and heavily populated planets of the galaxy. The Galactic Republic was born in the core worlds and spread out over the galaxy. Humans were supposed to have originated from this region. So humanity, the human race in the Star Wars universe, essentially they evolved and originated in that region and from among those planets, which I'm going to cover in that future blog, which I had mentioned. The core worlds are home planets such as that not only consist with the origins of intelligent life and the beginning of civilization, but also make up the epicenter of classical galactic civilization, such as art, literature, architecture, culture, and technology, and also the center of politics and galactic government. So essentially, what you have here in the core worlds is the most heavily densilated, populated civilization. It's where civilization began. It's where technology was invented, the beginning of the sharing of knowledge, of technology, of culture, and you know, it's the creme de la creme. It's the epicenter of civilization, as it says, the seat of the galactic government. It's where the prestigious of the Star Wars galaxy, of all civilizations, their art, their literature, architecture, culture, and technology. You know, it's where all of those, the best of the best, the heart of that civilization, the origins, everything. That's where that is seated in the core world. So the core is the seat of the center of civilization, and also of government, and also of culture. And culture being, which I just mentioned. And let's see, I'm going to talk about, before I go into this, let's just, okay, I'm going to talk about the planets, some of the planets. Now, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list of planets, and I know you think, well, if the core worlds are the epicenter of civilization in the Star Wars universe, I'm not going to be mentioning a whole lot of core worlds, so it seems that I'm not, it seems like why aren't there, you might question why aren't there more planets listed? Well, the reason being is because most of the planets that appear in the 6 movies and also the Clone Wars essentially don't appear within the planets that appear are not within the core worlds. Majority of them. There are some, which I'm going to mention, but not all of them, because majority of planets that are in the movies, the 6 movies in the Clone Wars, are within the other regions, especially the Outer Rim, which I'm going to get to in a second. But let's start off with the central planet, Coruscant. Okay, Coruscant is the capital planet of the Republic. It has urban, populated surface covered entirely with cities. And it's a seat of galactic government. Also, a seat of prior to the takeover of the Galactic Empire, Palpatine's regime, that's where also the Jedi Temple was. Of course, the Jedi Temple and the EU was moved, and I'm sure, even in the sequel trilogy, the Jedi Temple would have to be moved. Or maybe not, but I don't think it's on Coruscant anymore. But we'll find out as time goes on, and Episode 7 comes out, The Force Awakens. But prior to the time of the Old Republic, from the time of the formation of the Galactic Republic till the present, until Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, we see that the Jedi Temple is on the planet Coruscant. Coruscant, keep in mind, I mentioned Coruscant first, is the planet Coruscant is equal to Earth and Star Trek. If you watch Star Trek and you know Star Trek universe and Star Trek mythology, the United Federation planets, where the central planet in the United Federation planets is Earth. Well, Coruscant for the Star Wars universe is equal to what Earth is in the Star Trek universe, just to give you a little bit of an overview on that. Coruscant is the prime planet that is the center of their galaxy and locality, culturally and politically. There is a saying in their galaxy that whoever controls the planet Coruscant also controls the galaxy. And interesting enough, we know that because during that was the seat of the Galactic, that was the Senate, the Senate, the Supreme Chancellor, and the Galactic Senate ruled the galaxy from there. But also during Palpatine's regime, his palace was also on Coruscant too. So, and interesting enough, don't want to go off too far off this, but if you remember from the ending, the additions that Lucas had made to Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, remember at the end, after the Emperor and Vader died, that they were knocking the statue down, and that's very similar to what you have seen here in some of the European countries and Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, when regimes, dictators have died, they knock down his statue as a symbol that his reign is over. His reign, and they knock down the Emperor statue to show that the Emperor and his reign of the Galactic Empire was over on Coruscant. Well, anyway, let's move on. Alderaan. We should know that, especially from Episode 4, New Hope, because that was the first planet that was destroyed by the Death Star, the first Death Star. That Tarkin, you remember Grand Moff Tarkin destroyed with to terrorize the galaxy, and also Leia, to get Leia to talk, give information about the rebellion. Well, anyway, Alderaan, the planet Alderaan. That was populated by humans. Oh, by the way, before I get too far, some of these planets that I know of, I'm going to talk about the origin or the home planets of particular races. Coruscant, I don't mention the prime race that lives, that's populated on that planet, because it's sort of like the melting pot, just like New York City. New York City, you have people from all over the world, from Asia, from Europe, from Africa, from South America. Everybody in the world visits New York. Well, that's the thing, is that everybody in the galaxy, all the humans and all the other alien races, both live and visit Coruscant, so that's sort of like the melting pot of the entire galaxy. But Alderaan is populated by humans, and it's the home of Bail Organa and his adoptive daughter Leia. Remember from Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, that Bail Organa takes the infant Leia back home for he and his wife to raise as their own daughter, their adopted daughter. And Alderaan is renowned for beauty, culture, and commitment to peace. If you remember from the scenes that you see from Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, it's a very beautiful planet, very similar to Earth in its atmosphere, has small seas, doesn't have gigantic oceans like we have, separated by the nation states and the continents, but it does have small seas, and its land is its continents are very much similar to what Earth is like. But it's very renowned. The human is like the very much creme de la creme for human civilization, for their highest renown for beauty, for their beauty in their culture, art and literature, their philosophy, the commitment to peace. Many of them are pacifists, not all of them. They obviously were being drawn, secretly being drawn into the rebellion and trying to run secret missions for the Alliance, the Rebel Alliance, during, if you remember from Episode 4, A New Hope, the blockade runner, which was an Alderaan ship, Bail Organa ship that Leia was on. That was Alderaan. That ship was from Alderaan. It was running missions secretly for the Alliance, the Rebel Alliance, and it was discovered, even though that Alderaan claimed to be peaceful and commitment to pacifism. The Empire, especially Darth Vader, suspected them of secretly helping the Rebel Alliance out. And that's what got that planet in trouble, somewhat made him a target for Tarkin and Vader to destroy. But anyway, I'm not going to go into too much of that. Let's go on to Corellia, the planet Corellia. Okay, that is also a human world, human-populated world. It's the home of Han Solo and Wedge Antilles. Remember Wedge from episodes 4, 5, and 6? Rogue Squadron leader. Okay, and we all know who Han Solo is. Okay, but also listen to this. Historians believe that the Celestials, an ancient race outside the galaxy, assembled the system artificially, the Corellia system, and the worlds were brought from other parts of the galaxy for unknown reasons. Some believe that these Celestials populated Corellia with humans from Coruscant. So I'm going to leave that a little bit for my blog, talking about the origins, because keep in mind that blog I told you I'm going to be covering is going to be talking about the topics of the origin of humanity and the Star Wars galaxy, and theories on where they have what planet did the race of humans originate on. Is it Coruscant, or is it another world, another planet in the core worlds? But anyway, that's pretty much what I'm going to say for that. Corellia, like I said, is, keep in mind, home planet, human. It's a human-populated world, home of Han Solo and Wedge Antilles, and it was believed that it was artificially constructed by these ancient aliens, and planets were actually brought into that system. It must be super powerful race, almost godlike, to have been able to carry planets and put them in artificially into a star system. But anyway, let's move on. Scipio. Okay, Scipio is a planet. It's nice. It's a nice planet. It's covered in ice and snow. The moons and humans. Humans and moons populate that planet. And what else can I say? Moons are the ones that control the banking system, the corporate banking system. And Scipio, I mentioned that because keep in mind, majority of the planets, let me back up because I don't want to confuse anyone. Majority of planets that I'm going to be talking about and covering in this blog are primarily from the appearance as from the 6 Star Wars movies, episodes 1 through 6, and also the Clone Wars. And I will mention the ones that come from the EU Legends, but like I said, there's still that controversy of what we can count as canon and non-canon. But in spite of that, there are a few that I will list from the EU. But the majority, 90% of the planets that I mentioned, are the ones that are mentioned or appear in either the 6 Star Wars movies or the Clone Wars. Scipio is one of them, and that appeared in the Clone Wars episode Old Friends and Rise of Clovis and The Crisis at Heart from the Season 6 of the Clone Wars, The Lost Missions. If you remember those 3 stories from the Lost Mission episodes of the Clone Wars series. Okay, the final one I'm going to mention for the core worlds is Duro. The Duros, it's a cousin race for the Nemodians, but the Duros, now they're mentioned. The planet is mentioned in the EU, but it's an official planet in canon in the Star Wars universe. An official race, Duro, and they have a very densely populated, urban populated planet, but it's so industrialized that there's so much pollutants. It's like the environmental problems gone array, and it's very hard to live on that planet because of the smog and the pollution and all the stuff that they have. But that is the home planet of the Duro. Duro is obviously the home planet of the Duros, so it's pretty simple to remember. Anyway, let's go on to the next section. The next section beyond the core worlds is the colonies. Okay, let's talk about the colonies. The colonies was the name given to a region of the galaxy between the core worlds and the inner rim. It was among the first area outside the core to be colonized, and the worlds were typically heavily populated, industrialized, and cultured. So I guess after the core worlds were populated, just like you see in Star Trek. If you see the original series of Star Trek and look at a map there, the section of the galaxy is a lot smaller as far as explored, charted, and populated, and brought into the United Federation planets. That section is a lot smaller than you would see in the Next Generation series, which is bigger, because there's more exploration for exploring out. So that's what happened when in Star Wars, when the humans and aliens got together and shared technology and culture, and they started exploring the galaxy thousands of years ago. They explored the core worlds, that region, and then they went further out into the galaxy. And when they colonized that, it was originally known as the colonies, as I just explained. Now let's talk about the section of the colonies in the Star Wars galaxy. Let's talk about those planets. Now keep in mind the planets that I mentioned are either appeared or mentioned in the 6 movies, Star Wars movies, or Star Wars The Clone Wars. Let's start off with the first one. Caden Nemoria. You remember that was mentioned also in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. It was also appeared in the Clone Wars. Okay, that's not the Nemodian homeworld, but it is Nemodian populated. They have populated that planet. That's their planet. Some of them immigrated there, but that's a Nemodian planet. Now remember, the Nemodians, if you remember, they are the ones over the Trade Federation in the episodes 1, 2, and 3. Those aliens that are in control of the Trade Federation. So that's the race that I am referring to. And they appeared in the Clone Wars episodes The Senate Spy and Sabotage. And also it was mentioned in Episode 3 when Obi-Wan tells Anakin, says, mentioning that time that they were on Caden Nemoria. So that's one of the planets. Deveronian. Devaron. Excuse me, I apologize. Devaron. That's the next planet. Deveronians. That's the home planet of the Deveronians. And the Deveronians were known. They look like, a lot of them, ironically, sort of tongue-in-cheek. They look like have that devil, the horns. Referred to as, some people think that Deveronians is a short for devil, although they're not. It's a race of alien beings. But that's just to give you. They appeared, the race you can remember from Episode 4. They were in the Cantina. They were in the Cantina, Episode 4, New Hope, of Mos Eisley Cantina, and The planet also appeared in the Clone Wars episodes The Cargo of Doom and Monster. So that's where they appeared. The planet Devaron appeared. Tholoth is the home planet of the Tholothians, if I'm pronouncing that right. Tholothians. So that's the next planet for the colonies, Tholoth. And Balmorra. Now Balmorra is a planet in the EU Legends. I don't think they appeared or mentioned anywhere of the 6 movies or the Clone Wars. I think the only appearances in the they're an important planet. They appear in the Star Wars EU Legends, and I like to think of it as canon. But it's a factory world used by humans, Hutts, and Twilights. So it's it's a factory world, world that Grand Admiral Thrawn had visited and was looking for stuff to help him in his battle plans for reconquering the New Republic. But I don't want to go too much into that now. I could probably save that for another blog to talk about that. But anyway, that's essentially Balmorra is a factory world used by the humans, Hutts, and Twilights. Okay, now the next section we're going to go into after the colonies is the inner rim. Inner rim. Keep in mind we have the inner rim, mid rim, and the outer rim. So now we're going into the inner rim, which is the next section after the colonies. The inner rim was a region of the galaxy between the colonies and the expansion region. It was originally just called the Rim, as it was expected to be the farthest extent of the known galaxy for centuries. But the expanded rim, later renamed expansion regions, was open within 100 years of the inner rim. So I guess after the colonies were colonized, explored, charted, and colonized by the humans and other alien races with the hyperdrive system in their ships, they went out further into the galaxy and charted further the next section, which they refer to as the inner rim, and colonized and civilized that area of space. And they just call it the Rim at that point because they didn't have their various rims. That was the first area that they referred to as the Rim. They later changed it after they charted and renamed other regions as the Mid Rim, the Outer Rim. They changed that section to the Inner Rim, but it was just called the Rim at that point. But like I said, like I was just mentioning, that within 100 years after that the Inner Rim was colonized, they had another region, which I will get into in a minute, which they refer to as the Expanded Rim, later known as the Expansion Region, which I will get into in a minute. Okay, let's go to the first planet in the Inner Rim, Onderon. Okay, Onderon, and that's a planet that was significant for the Clone Wars series. It appeared in season 5, 4 episodes: The War on Two Fronts, Frontrunners, The Soft War, and Tipping Point. Remember that Ahsoka Tano, she helped the rebels on that planet, on the citizens, the rebellion, the citizens who were in rebellion against the tyrannical king that was serving Dooku, Count Dooku, and was trying to join the Separatists. They were in rebellion and trying to free their planet from that king and from the tyranny of Count Dooku and the Separatists. So that was 4-episode series in that on season 5 of the Clone Wars that took place on the planet Onderon. So I'll leave you to watch those episodes to learn more about it. Bestine IV. Bestine is mentioned in the movies, particular episode 4, and probably in other areas. It was other times. It was also in the EU Legends. It was mentioned, but Bestine IV is one of the planets, and it's a human-populated world, and it's an agricultural world, agricultural, not very technologically advanced, but it was an agricultural planet inhabited by humans. and one of the Rebel Alliance's most famous X-Wing pilot, Jek Porkins. You remember from Episode 4, New Hope? His ship was destroyed early. He was a heavyset guy who flew with Rogue Squadron under oh my goodness, my brain is freezing at this point. Wedge Antilles, the Rogue Squadron at Wedge Antilles, but his ship was destroyed in the attack against the first Death Star. But Bestine IV is where he is from. But that's the planet where he is from. Quarzite, okay, that appeared in the Clone Wars episode Bounty. And the last planet I'm going to mention for the Inner Rim is Myrkr. Myrkr, if I'm pronouncing that right, hopefully. And I think that's significant. That's a significant planet, even though it's only mentioned in the Star Wars EU Legends. The EU Legends are the Timothy Zahn's Zahn trilogy. That's where Grand Admiral Thrawn. The Thrawn trilogy. Excuse me. That's where Grand Admiral Thrawn had visited to get these creatures called Ysalamiri. Ysalamiri were, sounds very similar to salamanders because that's what they look like. Probably just a little bit bigger than the average salamander. But Ysalamiri is like a amphibian-like creature, but it has this power in this little creature, which creates a bubble for the Force and forces back the Force. So anybody wearing this creature creates a bubble around their body, so a Force-sensitive being, or Jedi, cannot use the Force against them. And obviously, why Grand Admiral Thrawn, he's not a Force-sensitive creature, and certainly not a Jedi or a Sith, so obviously he used that to protect himself against the Skywalker family and the other Jedis that Luke was training to be Jedis, to protect himself from the Jedis and their power. But that's a planet that's mentioned in EU, the EU novels, particularly the Timothy Zahn Thrawn trilogy, and I like to think of that, in my opinion, as it's a planet that's in canonical with the Star Wars universe. Very fascinating planet. All right, that's just a sampling of the Inner Rim planets. Let's go now what I mentioned before, the expansion region, the next region that they had explored, but they retitled centuries later as the expansion region. The expansion region was an experiment in the corporate-controlled worlds, with powerful corporations exploiting and profiting heavily from the planets for their raw materials, metals, and ores. Inhabitants were oppressed while the corporation stripped entire stellar systems of all their resources. Eventually, civil unrest spread from system to system. The Galactic Republic eventually took control of the system due to the mounting pressures from the Denzines and limiting or evicting corporate interest. Expansion region worlds continued to be producers of raw material and ores. However, the national resources were exhausted by the Imperial period. So that's interesting. I guess in the early days of the Galactic Republic, when that was still frontier and outside of the Republic, they were being controlled by corporate interest, and the corporate interests are not humanitarian or altruistic. They're not there to help civilization. They're there for greed, to create more money, and they create a lot of oppression with slavery and stripped of natural resources and stuff like that. So the Galactic Republic eventually established rule in that area and civilized and brought those worlds into their government, the Galactic Republic government, and brought sort of a system of control, justice, and sort of created justice and equality and democracy in that area, the democracy for that region. But anyway, let me go on to talk about the few worlds. Now, keep in mind, there's only 3 planets that I want to mention, but very important ones that are important for this region, the expansion region. First one is Umbara. And that is inhabited by the race of Umbarans. And that planet appeared in 4 episodes of the Clone Wars series, known as Darkness on Umbara, the General, the Planet Descent, and the Carnage of Krell. So if you remember from Season 4, those four-part story arc in the Clone Wars Season 4, which had Krell, the Jedi Krell, who was getting the clones troopers slaughtered, and eventually turned to the dark side. Krell was a Jedi who turned to the dark side and tried to join Dooku and the Confederacy, the Separatist Confederacy for Independent Systems. So I'll let you watch those episodes to see details on that planet and what happens in those stories. But Umbara is one of the expansion region planets. Okay, here we go. Chile. Chile is the next planet. Now, Chile is very important because that's the home planet of the Tugrata. The Tugrata race. Keep in mind, our favorite Tugrata, our most beloved Tugrata, is Ahsoka Tano. Anakin's Padawan in the Clone Wars series. Ahsoka Tano is a Tugrata. Now, the planet does appear in the Clone Wars episode The Gathering, which is interesting, but that's the first time the planet actually appears. But that's the home planet. Chile is the home planet of the Tugrata. And think of the Tugrata, Ahsoka Tano is one. Now, they also had other ones, if you remember from the prequel trilogy, episodes 1, 2, and 3, they had other Tugrata Jedi, but Ahsoka Tano is probably the most remembered, most beloved. She was Anakin's Padawan in the Clone Wars series. The next one is Kyrios. That's also a Tugrata, even though it's not the home planet. It's a planet that many Tugrata have migrated to. But that's a Tugrata inhabited planet. And that appears in the Clone Wars episodes Kidnapped. So that's interesting. So I guess in the Season 5 episodes dealing with the Jedi the Jedi younglings and their training to become Padawans, that those two planets appear, the expansion region appears in the Clone Wars series. Okay, like I said, the galaxy, the civilizations explore further out into the galaxy, and so the next one we come to after the expansion region is the Mid-Rim. Okay, with fewer natural resources and therefore a smaller population than many neighboring regions, the Mid-Rim was a territory where residents worked hard for everything they had. Several planets had built up impressive economies, and pirate raiders often hid in relatively unexplored spaces far from the major trade routes. So I guess the Galactic Republic, as it continued to explore further out into the galaxy, inhabit and civilized, and brought those planets into the Galactic Republic, the civilization and government of the Galactic Republic, it became known as the Mid-Rim. And I just described what the Mid-Rim is all about. So if you give me a minute, turn my page. Okay, I'm going to cover the planets, which there are several more planets, interesting enough, several more planets for the Mid-Rim, and I'm going to try to cover them all. Most famous one, now keep in mind how I'm organizing these, is I'm going to naming the ones that appear in the 6 movies first. And the next set would be the ones that appear in the Clone Wars series. And the ones after that are the ones that are mentioned, but that are home planets to particular alien races that have been seen in the movies or the Clone Wars series. So the first one, which is most famously known, is Naboo, which appears in episodes 1, 2, and 3. Naboo is a human-populated planet, but also has a Gungan population that's underneath their lakes and in their seas and swamps and stuff like that. They live underneath the water. But above ground, above the water, humans are the primary population of Naboo. Naboo has large plains, it's swamps, it's seas, so it's very similar in atmosphere and in land to Earth. Not exactly like Earth, like I said. I'm just talking about similarities between environment, what the environment is like. So it's very similar to its environment is very similar to Earth. But let's see, it's a home. Well, what's significant is the home of Padme Amidala, who was once the queen. As a teen, she served as the queen of their civilization, their government, and then after she her term was up for queen, because they had a what we call a constitutional monarchy, where she had to be elected as queen. She inherited as like you see with the aristocracy and royal families in Europe. She was elected to that, but after her term was up as queen, she became the senator of the Galactic Republic, and she's also the wife of Anakin and the mother of Luke and Leia, the ones who are leaders of the Rebel Alliance. And also, the Naboo is also the home planet of Palpatine, who was a senator in the Galactic Republic, who manipulated his way to become Supreme Chancellor, and also ultimately to Emperor, dictator of the entire galaxy, which most evil Sith Lord and most powerful Sith Lord and the one who ruled over the galaxy during the time of the the final 3 movies, episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Star Wars. Okay, it appears in the battle of the significance, the Battle of Naboo in episode 1, The Phantom Menace. That happens, and it also Naboo appears in a couple episodes of the Clone Wars series, as well as episodes 1, 2, and 3. The next one is Kashyyyk. Kashyyyk should be very familiar because it's the home planet of the Wookiees. Chewbacca. That's Chewbacca's home planet. It's the home planet of the Wookiees. Its environment is jungles and forests, seas and lakes. The Wookiees live on these villages that are high in the trees. They built their trees are built and made for that. They can support villages and stuff like that. So they live in the tree. They live in villages in the trees. Which is very interesting, the Wookiee race. And that is the scene, Kashyyyk is the scene of the Battle of Kashyyyk in episode 3. That's when Yoda leads the clone troopers there to liberate that from the invasion forces of the Separatists. But that planet appears in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, Kashyyyk. Okay. Now we're going to move on to a couple, Nal Hutta and Nar Shaddaa. Nal Hutta is the planet. Nar Shaddaa is one of the moons of Nal Hutta, inhabitant moons. Nal Hutta is the home planet of the Hutts. Okay, it's the home planet of the Hutts, and it's very murky. It's the Hutts are not very environmentally savvy, and they're not keen on taking care of so it's very polluted, almost like what I mentioned with Duro. It's very polluted and murky and stuff like that. So it's not very easy, or only the Hutts can live in that kind of environment. But the Hutt race, that's the home planet of their race. Nar Shaddaa, on the other hand, is the moon of one of the most populated moon of Nal Hutta, and its nickname that most people are in the galaxy give it is known as the Smuggler's Moon. It's also known as Little Coruscant, because very much like Coruscant is densely populated, but also urban, covered in entire cities. Also is Nar Shaddaa. Nar Shaddaa is, like they call it, the Little Coruscant. It's also covered in cities, very urban. But it's also known as a Smuggler's Moon because, because it's controlled by the Hutts primarily, and not by the Galactic Republic. There's less democracy, less law and order, and it's more so a place where smugglers and other criminals and others like them would go there to do their illegal business. So it's not really a safe place to be. You can get yourself killed very easily by criminally minded people or organizations that are there on Nar Shaddaa. But Nar Shaddaa appears in a lot of Star Wars EU novels, but it also appears in the Clone War episode The Hunt for Zero. Remember The Hunt for Zero, when Obi-Wan and his name eludes me right now, but they were hunting for Zero the Hutt, who had escaped the prison of Coruscant. So that appeared. Nar Shaddaa appears in the Clone Wars episode, but it also appears several times in the Star Wars Expanded Universe novels too. The next one is Trandosha and Washia. Trandosha is the planet, and Washia is the moon. Is one of the moons of Trandosha. Okay, Trandosha is the home of the Trandoshans, the race of the Trandoshans. They're reptilian. If you remember Bosk, the bounty hunter Bosk from Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, and also there have been Trandoshans, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think Bosk was also seen in the Clone Wars series too. But the Trandoshans are also in the Clone Wars series because Waska is the moon. Waska is used by their Trandoshans as their hunting ground. That's their sport, hunting, and they hunt civilized species, including the one is the Wookiees. They hunt Wookiees for sport, and they also involve, because Trandosha is also in the same star system as Kashyyyk. They've been known to kidnap Wookiees and sell them to slave traders, and also use them for the hunt them for sport. And Washka, the moon Washka, is used for sporting ground. That's their hunting ground that they transport their victims to, and they hunt. But that planet appears in the two-part season 3 finale, two-part the Padawan Lost in the Wookiee hunt when Ahsoka was kidnapped, along with and met Chewbacca and other Wookiees as they were being hunted by the Trandoshans. Let's go on to the next one. Rusonian race. That's the home planet of Rusonian race. And that appeared in the Clone Wars episode Duel of the Droids. Tadiria. That's the home planet of the Tadirians. Watto, think of Watto from episodes 1 and 2. And Watto, who used to own Anakin and his mother Shmi as slaves. But Watto was a Tidarian. The home planet of Tideria. And that planet appeared in the Clone Wars supply lines. If you remember that when Bail Organa was trying to appear before the Council of Tidarians on their home planet of Tideria. Trying to get support for the war effort and for the Galactic Republic. Malastare. Malastare is the next planet. And that's the home race of the Dugs. The most famous of the Dugs is Salboba Flash. If you remember, he is the kind of the unruly, arrogant, obnoxious Dug who got in trouble. Well, first was trying to start trouble with Jar Jar, and also he was in the race. He was one of the pod racers who wasn't afraid to cheat in order to win. Of course, he lost in the pod races, as we know. If you saw episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Anakin was the one who won, but he tried to cheat in order to win. But on Malastare, that's the home place of the Dugs, because he was a Dug. And that planet appeared in the Clone Wars episode, The Zilla Beast. Let's go on to the next one, Ando, the planet Ando. That's the home planet of the Aqualish. Aqualish, remember Pandababa in the and I'm trying to think of the doctor's name, the psychotic doctor in Episode 4, New Hope, where they gave Luke trouble and then ended up creating a conflict, and Obi-Wan solved that by pulling out his lightsaber and slashing off the arm of Pandababa, the alien Pandababa, who was not, he was an Aqualish, and he was from the planet Ando. Ando is an oceanic planet, mostly covered with water and oceans, and that's the planet Ando. The next one is Bothaway. Bothaway should be something familiar, like especially for those in the Star Wars EU, because that's the home planet of the Bothans. The Bothans are like the cat-like race. They are very civilized, urban, populated planet, but they're very civilized in culture and art. But they're experts. They're like the creme de la creme for spies. They have the Bothan spy network. For those who are familiar with the Star Wars expanded universe, the Bothans, as they are in the EU. But it's Bothaway is a cosmopolitan planet, and I like to think of that as a planet that is canonical with the Star Wars universe. Next planet is Ithor. Ithorians, if you remember from, they appeared in many of the Clone Wars episodes. Also appeared in Episode 4, New Hope. Remember the big head, known as titled, nicknamed Hammerhead? Well, those are Ithorians, and they come from the planet Ithor. And they're very ecologically conscious. They're a very ecologically conscious race. Interesting enough. The next planet is Eridonia, and that is the home planet of the Zabrak race. Zabraks, think of Darth Maul and Savage Opress. They are Zabraks, but that is the home. Eridonia is the home planet of the Zabrak race. I'm trying to think of if they appeared in any of the Clone Wars episodes. I know the Eridonia is mentioned, but that is their home planet. Eileen. Now keep in mind the Zabrak. Let me go back to the Zabraks. When you first meet Savage Oppressed, it's not on Eridonia. Some of the tribes of Zabraks were on with the Night Sisters. But I'll get to that in a minute. The name eludes me, but I'll get to that in a minute. Eileen is the last planet I want to mention. Eileen is a rocky planet, it's a very harsh rocky planet, and it appears in the Clone Wars episode's Mercy Mission. But those are the planets that I had mentioned, a sampling of planets that are mentioned that are in the mid-rim, that are mid-rim planets, excuse me. Now let's go on to the next section, which is probably the biggest section, known as the Outer Rim. So again, in the Galactic Civilization, the Galactic Republic, in its early days, continued to explore further into the galaxy. They came upon, and eventually the planets that they brought in to the Galactic Republic, and they titled that area as the Outer Rim, the farthest one, the Outer Rim, which was, in a lot of ways, it was frontier, even in the days of the Old Republic, which you see in Episode 1. That's why slavery, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, that's why slavery, we had slavery on Tatooine, which Padme mentioned that slavery was outlawed in the Republic, but the Republic law didn't apply to them, a lot of planets in the Outer Rim. But anyway, let me go on. Interesting enough, I make this note. It says, while living with his Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru on Tatooine, Luke Skywalker once said to C-3PO that, quote, if there's a bright center to the universe, you're on the planet that it's farthest from. And that's from, unquote, that's from Episode 4, New Hope. And when one sees the difference between the star systems of the Outer Rim compared to the star systems of the core worlds, they can fully appreciate what Luke was trying to express. So let's go on to describe what the Outer Rim is. The Outer Rim territories was the last widely settled expanse before wild space and the unknown regions. It was a place where the Mandalorians began their crusades in the hope of provoking the Galactic Republic into war. It was strewn with obscure worlds and rugged, primitive frontier planets. Due to its distance from the core, the region was home to many supporters of the Rebel Alliance. The Empire's Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin was assigned the difficult task of bringing the entire Outer Rim in line. You remember that in Episode 4, New Hope, where Tarkin said, "Well, we got to make a planet. We've got to make an example of a planet." Of course, when Leia had lied and gave the location of the Dantooine planet where the Rebel Alliance was at, but no longer at, they say, well, that was too remote for a section to make an example, so that's why they made an example of Alderaan. And Tarkin's job was to bring the entire Outer Rim under control of the Galactic Republic and make them fear the Galactic Republic. But majority of the planets in the Outer Rim, well, let me just say this, majority of the planets seen in the movies and also in the Clone Wars series took place in the Outer Rim. That's why there's going to be a lot that I'm going to be talking about here. And but that's the reason why I'm going to be mentioning. So you talk about the core worlds where there's so few, and while there's going to be a lot I'm going to be mentioning in the Outer Rim. Well, the reason for that is because the majority of planets seen in the 6 movies and also in the Clone Wars were planets from the Outer Rim. And like I said, a lot of the planets are Outer Rim, even though they were under control of the Galactic Republic and trying terrorized by the Empire, controlled by the Empire. There were still a lot of those worlds were still in control of the Hutts and Frontier, and they weren't under the laws of the Galactic Republic, like I had mentioned, even in the time of the Old Republic in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, because, like I said, slavery still existed there. But here are the planets. Now, like I said, the first set of planets that I mentioned are going to be the ones that are seen or mentioned in the movies. The next set are the one from the Clone Wars, and the last are just general planets that are mentioned from various alien races to home planets of the alien races seen or mentioned in the movies or the Clone Wars. So let's start off with the first one I'd mentioned, Tatooine. Tatooine is just like Coruscant is for the core worlds. Tatooine is the most significant planet that we think of, thinking of the Outer Rim. And it's the native species for Tatooine, or indigenous, shall I say, or Jawas and Tusken Raiders. Now you see, it's a melting pot because they have various alien races. It's a planet controlled by the Hutts. And they have, in the different towns and taverns, they have various alien races and traders and smugglers and doing their business. But the indigenous, they're from other planets. The 2 indigenous races are the Jawas and the Tusken Raiders. And remember, the Jawas were the ones who are traders of droids. They're sort of like pirates. They steal droids and they resell them. Tusken Raiders are a nomadic race. They're very tribal, nomadic, and very tough and aggressive towards outsiders. And Tatooine is primarily a desert planet. Now I'm going to get too into that because there's probably a blog I'll save for later. It's a desert planet. Moisture farmers go there because there's not any really lakes or seas in there, but there's a lot of moisture, humidity that they are able to draw out from the hot weather and the humid weather and get water and sell water. Moisture farms, known as moisture farms, and Owen and Baru Lars were moisture farmers on that planet. But the taverns in the cities, spaceports, were used for smugglers and other people doing various business, whether it be legal or illegal. And most significant because Tatooine is seen in almost all of the movies, including the Clone War, even the Clone Wars movie. It's mentioned in all the 6 Star Wars movies, except for Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, but it's mentioned at the end. Remember when Luke says, "I'll meet you," tells Lando and Chewie ready to go off to search for hand. Luke says, "I'll meet you on Tatooine," which we see in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. But significantly, Tatooine is home. Was the home for Anakin and his son Luke. Anakin, as a boy, was kept there as a slave under the Hutts, owned by Watto, and of course Luke was raised by his aunt and uncle Beru. Aunt Beru, Uncle Owen, and Aunt Beru. He was raised on Tatooine, but that's the significance of the planet Tatooine. But that's why, because it's mentioned or shown in all the movies except for Empire Strikes Back. Anyway, let's go on. The next one is Yavin 4, which is actually Yavin is actually a gas giant. So when they say Yavin 4, it's the fourth moon of the Yavin planet, and the moon is a jungle and rainforest moon, and it's a scene for the Battle of Yavin. Actually the second. I was going to say the first, but it's actually the second, because remember in the crawl text of Episode 4, New Hope, it says that the Rebel Alliance had already won one of their first major victories against the Galactic Empire. But the Galactic Empire was trying to search for the Rebel Alliance base, and when they found it, which was being hidden on the Yavin moon, Yavin 4, the moon, they tried to destroy it and destroy the entire Rebel base and the Rebel Alliance in one swift blast. But they had attacked when Luke had joined them, and they attacked the base. They attacked Luke and Rogue Squadron had attacked the Death Star and destroyed the Death Star in Episode 4, New Hope. So that was the scene that was known as the Battle of Yavin, and that was, if you remember from what I talked about in Star Wars history, how we measure time. Usually, because Star Wars Episode 4 was the first Star Wars movie, they usually measure time before Yavin and after Yavin, before the Battle of Yavin and after the Battle of Yavin. So that was the significance for Yavin 4. Let's go on to the next one, which appears in Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. Hoth, the planet Hoth. It was the sixth planet in the Hoth system. We refer to it as Hoth still. It's a snow and ice planet. There is no advanced intelligent species on the planet Hoth, but there is other non-sentient animal races on Hoth. The two of them that are significant is Wampas and Tauntauns. Wampas are the big white creatures that, like polar bears and the abominable snowman put together. That attacks Luke in the beginning, tries to carry him off for food back to his cave, and then you see the Tauntauns, which the rebels ride on. They're almost they're like the animals that are domesticated, and they use them for transport. Almost like what we use for horses. Ride on horses. They ride on Tauntauns. But they're both indigenous species for the planet Hoth, and they don't live on the surface where it's freezing cold, 700 degrees below zero, but they have caves and underground dwellings where they live and find food and stuff like that. But Hoth is a scene for the Battle of Hoth. You remember when they tried to have a ground invasion? The Empire found them and tried to attack them from a ground invasion to take out their base with the AT-AT walkers, and that's one where the Rebel Alliance. That's one of the battles the Rebel Alliance had lost. And they barely escaped with their lives in Episode 5 of Empire Strikes Back. But that's the planet Hoth. Let's go on to the planet Dagobah. Which we learn a lot more in the Clone Wars series, but we see in episode. We see at the end of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, when Yoda goes there into his isolation. He goes there just to remain in isolation, but we also see it primarily in Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, when Yoda teaches Luke to become a Jedi and the ways of the Jedi, and also towards his death in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. But the planet Dagobah as a swamp. It's a very remote planet, uninhabited by any advanced, intelligent. Again, it's a planet that's not inhabited by other than Yoda, but Yoda's there as living as a hermit in isolation. But it's not naturally inhabited by any intelligent race, but there are plenty of various animals, reptilian, amphibian in nature, being it's a swamp. It's the nature of the planet, because the planet is a swamp and forest. That's pretty much what the planet is made up of. So Yoda lives there in seclusion, and it also appears, in the Clone Wars Season 6 Lost Missions episodes, the episode Voices, where Qui-Gon leads him to the planet. Yoda leads Yoda to the planet Dagobah for the first time, and I guess that's why Yoda chooses that for his seclusion, to live there in seclusion after the events of Episode 3. But Qui-Gon leads him there for the first time to teach him about Dagobah, because Dagobah is a planet that is rich in the Force and it's very powerful in the sense of the Force, and I guess maybe because of the presence of life there. I mean, the animal and plant life and its seclusion, non-technological and with very advanced civilization living there. But it's an interesting planet. But that's where the planet where Yoda goes to live in seclusion after they lose their war against the Sith. But anyway, let's go on. Let's go on to the planet Bespin. Bespin is a gas giant. It's a gas giant where shall I say, doesn't really have a ground or a surface, the planet Bespin. But it's significant for Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, because Cloud City is there. And it's a city that exists in the clouds and exists in a layer of the clouds which has a rich oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere where humans and other oxygen-breathing advanced alien races can live there, where they do business. And what they do is, in Cloud Cities, they mine Tabana gas. Tabana gas is something that they use for energy and for fuel. And Lando Calrissian, he's the administrator for Cloud City, and he runs that business. And well, I don't want to go too much into detail. We all know who Lando Calrissian is, and how he runs his administration, and what the relationship is with the Galactic Empire, trying to stay out of the war and the conflict, but getting drawn in. But that's what Bespin is. Essentially, Bespin is a gas giant, which is significant because of it's used to mine Tabana gas, primarily in Cloud City. But anyway, let's move on. Endor. Endor is a moon. Endor is a moon for a gas giant. And we know Endor significantly because it's the home world of the Ewoks, and it's a forest moon. And it's significant because that's where the Battle of Endor. It was a ground battle taking place with the Rebel Alliance, fighting off the Galactic Imperial troops, and also the space battle with the Rogue Squadron and other squadrons having a space battle trying to take out the Imperial Navy so they can destroy the second Death Star. That happened in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. So that was the moon, the forest moon of Endor. And next planet is Geonosis, and that's the home planet of the Geonosians from Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. They're an insect-like race, but a very advanced, intelligent, and advanced technologically. It was a desert planet, a very arid and desert planet, and it was a scene for the Battle of Geonosis in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. The next planet, and of course, I also too, in addition to appearing in, because that was the Battle of Geonosis. Keep in mind, was the first planet, was the first battle of the Clone Wars. That's where the Clone Wars officially began. But also appeared because there was a second Battle of Geonosis in the second season of the Clone Wars. So Geonosis was also seen in the Clone Wars series. But anyway, let's move on. The next planet is Utapau. Utapau is the race of the pawns. Remember, one of the pawns is seen in the new Star Wars series, the Rebels. He's the Imperial Inquisitor, but even though he appears menacing, the pawns are generally peaceful and democratic, as seen in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And Utapau, what it is, the surface of it is they have errant sinkholes, various holes, massive holes in the surface of the planet, and from the surface of the planet, which they live in cities underneath the ground from these sinkholes. And it's the place, its significance is where Obi-Wan came to, and he finally defeated General Grievous. He killed General Grievous in a battle in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So that's the planet Utapau. Mustafar, interesting enough, Mustafar is a volcanic planet. And the significance is that's where the official end of the Clone Wars, where Palpatine tricked the last surviving leaders of the Confederacy for Independent Systems, tricked them to go into, and then he sent Anakin to kill them all, and then demanded the Confederacy, the Separatists, the rest of the Separatists, surrender, which they did. They surrendered their droid army, and they surrendered. But Anakin went there and was staying there, ruling over that planet, when Obi-Wan met them there for their infamous battle, which we know Anakin lost, and that's where he lost his limbs and became deformed, and then by the lava and the fire, and how he was put into that famous suit, which we know as Darth Vader's suit. But that's where they had their deadly encounter. And the reason why Lucas had that planet is because he envisioned a planet, he wanted to envision that they had their deadly encounter, theme very similar to Dante's Inferno, that Anakin descends into hell, so it was a planet like hell. Mustafar is like a very planet that's very similar to what he considers like hell, even though that there's an oxygen atmosphere that humans and other alien races can breathe. It's a volcanic planet, and it's very similar because of lava and heat and everything else. That it's very similar to hell. They consider very similar to hell, their concept of hell. The next planet is Selekami. Okay, Selekami is an errant techno-union world. And Quinlan Voss, I apologize. You remember I mentioned back with the episode where Obi-Wan and Quinlan Voss visit Nal Hutta looking for searching for Zero the Hutt. Well, it was Quinlan Voss. I couldn't think of his name at the time, but it eluded me. But Quinlan Voss was the cowboy Jedi who went rogue and was wondering if he was going to turn to the dark side, because he went undercover trying to get Dooku's trust in order to undermine his plans. But it was very dangerous because they worried that he would turn to the dark side. But Selekami was one where he won that great victory, which was covered in the Republic series of Star Wars Republic of Dark Horse's comic series. But it was also mentioned, I consider that canon, because it was mentioned in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, as the planet where Quinlan Voss Master Voss had won that great victory. And it appears in the Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. That's the Jedi Master Stas Ali was killed. He was murdered when Order 66 was given. And the planet also appeared in the Clone Wars episodes Grievous Intrigue and The Deserter. So that's the significance of that planet. The next one is Felucia. It's a jungle planet, and Lucas was making a mention, talking about the special features for Episode 3, talking about how it's a jungle planet, but it's very alien in origin. I mean, the plant life and stuff like that is so dissimilar to what we know of as plant life here on Earth. So it's very interesting. But that appears That appeared in Revenge of the Sith and also appeared in the Clone War episodes Holocron Heist and Bounty Hunters. And is a scene in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, where the Jedi Master Ali Secura, a Twi'lek Jedi Master, she was murdered when Order 66 was given in that scene in the movie. Okay, let's go on to the Clone Wars episodes, specific Clone Wars episodes planets. Christophsis, if I'm pronouncing that right, very hard planet to pronounce, Christophsis, that appeared in the Clone Wars movie that introduced the Clone Wars series. And it's a crystalline world. And it appeared in the Clone Wars movie and also in the Clone Wars episode Cat and Mouse and the Hidden Enemy. But that's a significant planet that started off the Clone Wars series. Okay, let's go on to these other planets. Rhodia. Rhodia is very interesting. Rhodians. It's the home planet of the Rhodians. Think of Greedo, which is think of him as the controversy. Ironically, tongue-in-cheek, so I would say the controversy. Rhodian, Greedo, the bounty hunter, because that was the whole controversy that some fans get upset about who shot first, Han or Greedo, you know. But Greedo is a Rhodian, and Rhodia is the home planet. Rhodia is the home planet of Rhodians, obviously. It's a rainforest industrial planet, so it sort of feels like an oxymoron because it's very densely humid rainforest, but it's very industrialized by the Rhodian race. And they appear in the first season episode of the Clone Wars called Bombay Jedi. You remember where the Separatists are trying to take control of that planet, and as Jar Jar is guarding the ship, you know, the cloak that he's wearing, they assume that he's like a Jedi, and they kind of fear him, which is kind of funny, but it's an interesting episode. But Rhodia, that's the planet Rhodia. Next one is Meridoon. Meridoon. Meridoon is home of the Emanian race. If I'm pronouncing that right, I apologize if I'm not. The Emanian race. And it appeared in the Clone Wars episodes of... Let me start off with this. It appeared in the Clone Wars, this first season episodes of Jedi Crash and Defenders of Peace. The Emanians, if you remember, they were a pacifist race, and they were very critical on the Jedis, unaccepting of the Jedis, untrusting of the Jedis. But they had to later learn how to work with them, because even though they were pacifists, they learned that the Separatists were going to try to gain that victory by essentially annihilating all life on that planet. So they had to help the Jedi in order to defend their very existence. But Meridoon is the planet that happened on, and it was a place with it's a grassy and forested planet, world with grassy and forested surface. But that's the planet Meridoon. Next one is Ordo Plutonia. Ordo Plutonia is a home planet of the Talz. And, you know, they look like very similar, not exactly, but somewhat similar to like Wampas, but they're intelligent, they're sentient and intelligent. Talz. Even matter of fact, one of them actually does become a Jedi. And the reason why they're so big and so heavy, and they're white fur, covered in white fur, is because they're on. Ordo Plutonia is a nice planet. And it's but it's occupied by another twin moon that is trying to take control of that planet during the time of the Clone Wars. And it appears in the Clone Wars episode Trespass from the first season. Ryloth. Let's go on to the next one. The planet Ryloth. That's the home planet of the Twi'leks. The Twi'leks are the ones who have those long tentacles in the back of their head. A lot of them are blue. They have various colors, but majority of them are blue. The planet Ryloth is a harsh, rocky planet, and it appears in the Clone Wars episodes in the first season, from Storm over Ryloth, The Innocence of Ryloth, and Liberty over Ryloth, the trilogy story arc, where the theme of that is from the D-Day invasion of the Second World War, where the Separatists are controlling and occupying They're the oppressive occupiers of the planet Ryloth, and the Republic, through the Jedi generals, the Jedi Masters, are trying to liberate Ryloth, along with the clone army. They're trying to liberate the planet Ryloth and the Twi'leks from the Separatists, and that three-part trilogy of episodes from the Clone Wars series, first season of the Clone Wars series, to be technically exact. But that's the planet Ryloth. Next one is Sullust. And if you remember that planet it was mentioned in episode 6, Return of the Jedi, because that's when Vader mentioned Emperor Palpatine. He goes, what do you make of the rebels who are amassing a fleet at Sullust? Well, that was the planet Sullust. Well, Sullustines, yeah, are the race that inhabit the planet. That's their planet, Sullust. And it's very rocky, and it's a rocky and lava planet. So very harsh on the outside environment, but the Sullustans live underground where it's more habitable. That's where they primarily and appears in the Clone Wars episodes Night Sisters. But it also Neon Noon, if you remember him, he was the co-pilot of Lando in episode 6 when Return of the Jedi, when on their attack against the second Death Star. So he was his co-pilot in the Millennium Falcon, so that if you're confused with what the Sullustans are, Neon Noon, who was the co-pilot with Lando. You kind of get an understanding. But I guess what was happening there is before the major attack against the second Death Star in Endor, they were amassing the fleet and gathering the fleet and planning the attack next to the planet Sullust. So Sullust was probably the planet that they were preparing their attack against the second Death Star. Mandalore. Let's go on to the next one. Mandalore. That should be very similar. Somewhat controversial to those who are into Mandalorian mythology, but used to be run by the race of Tongs thousands of years ago, which I'll get into later. I don't want to get into now because that'll take too much time, but that's a topic that I will be talking about, the blog that I'm referring to, which will be the one after next. But the Tong race. But also, ultimately, later on in the modern period, during the time of the Clone Wars, and during the time of the movies, it was inhabited by humans. But the humans that were Mandalorians, because the Tongs were believed to be the original race of the Mandalorians, but humans, this was populated by the Mandalorians, which were humans at the time of the movies in the Clone Wars series. And that appears in the Clone War episodes, the Mandalorian plot, and many others, because there's a whole theme of stories that take place during the Clone Wars series, which they keep, the planet Mandalore is constantly revisited. But there's a whole history and a whole mythology behind the planet Mandalore and the Mandalorian race. And but anyway, I'll save that for another time, another blog, to go into details with that. To go on to the next one, the planet Vanquor. It's a human-populated planet, has desert and canyons, and it appears in the Clone Wars episodes Dooku Capture, Death Trap, and R2 Come Home from the second season of the Clone Wars series. Anyway, moving on. Oh, I apologize. Moving on. Let's go on to the planet Sereno. It's a planet inhabited by humans and Twi'leks. So cohabited by humans and Twi'leks. And has mountains and rainforest. That's the surface, mountains and rainforest. And it's the home of Count Dooku. Now keep in mind, Sereno is a planet that human population has in their history a royalty of counts that live there, that have come from there. There's a rural families that live there from race of humans, primarily a race of humans. Count Dooku is one of them. And that was his home planet before he joined the Jedi Order. And that appears in the Clone Wars EU novels, that planet where Count Dooku is from. It also appears in the Clone War episodes Night Sisters and many others. where you see Dooku, where Dooku is, and where he's living or where he's at when some of these events take place, where he's staying at. But Sereno, keep in mind, that's in addition to being humans and Twi'leks, it's also the home of the home planet of many counts, including Count Dooku. The planet Dathomir, that's the one I was thinking about. That's the one I was thinking about in the past. Dathomir, when I was mentioning that where where many of the Zabraks were taken to, or were also inhabiting the planet Dathomir that were taken. That's where Darth Maul and Savage Opress were from. They weren't from living on their home planet. They were on Dathomir at the time. But Dathomir is a planet with the Force Witches, known as the Night Sisters. They first appeared in the EU novels, Star Wars EU Expanded Universe novels, but they were included in the Clone Wars series as the Night Sisters, so they're canonical with the Star Wars series. It's also the home planet where the Rancors come from, because even though the Rancors appear in Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, Rancors were they're not natural indigenous to Tatooine. They're indigenous to Dathomir, the planet Dathomir. And Dathomir was a surface was covered in forest and savannas. That's the primary that's the primary surface of planet Dathomir. And they appear in the Clone Wars episodes, the episodes of Night Sisters, Monsters, and Witches of the Mist. And there's several others. But the first time that you see Dathomir is in that trilogy from Season 3 of the Night Sisters trilogy, from Season 3 of the Clone Wars. But anyway, let's move on. The Lola Sayu, if I'm pronouncing that right, forgive me if I'm not, is sulphurous world, but its appearance in the Clone Wars episodes, the Citadel Counterattack and the Citadel Rescue. If you remember, it's a world, it's a very harsh volcanic and sulphurous world, but it appears in the trilogy. The trilogy stories episodes in Season 3 of the Clone Wars, where Obi-Wan and the rest of the Jedi try to, and the clone troopers, they freeze themselves in carbonite so they can pass beyond the detectors of the droid army of life forms, and they are able to secretly get on that planet to rescue one of the Jedi Masters. That's what happens on that planet, Sole Sayu, that planet. That three-part trilogy episodes from the Clone Wars series. The next one I want to mention is Mon Calamari, and that's obviously the home planet of the Mon Calamarians. They live closer to the surface. The Quarrens live further underneath the ocean. So Mon Calamarians and the Quarrens are the two races that are the indigenous races of that planet. But it's an aquatic planet, primarily covered with water, with small islands, but primarily covered in oceans. And that appears in the Clone Wars episodes. That planet appears a lot in the EU novels, the Expanded Universe novels, but it also appears in the Clone War novel. The Clone Wars series, Water War, Gungan Attack, and Prisoners. The three-part trilogy episodes from the first three episodes of Season 4 of the Clone Wars. That's where they're trying, the Mon Calamarians and the Jedi are trying to keep Mon Calamari from being taken by the Separatists, by the Confederacy. The next one is Dantooine. I mentioned Dantooine before because it's a small planet, but it has grasslands, rivers, lakes, and it was used as a former rebel base somewhere in the past. So Leia lies and says partially true in the sense that the rebels used to have a base there, but they were far gone, so Leia would not betray the rebels, their location of the rebels. But Dantooine was the place where the rebels formerly had a base. Zygeria is the home planet of the Zygerians. And Zygeria, its surface had plains and highlands, primarily plains and highlands, and that had an appearance in the Clone Wars episode Slaves of the Republic and Escape from Kadavo, which appeared in the 4th season of the Clone Wars series. Lado Minor, the next one, Lado Minor, it's a junk world. That appeared in the Clone Wars episodes Brothers. That's where Savage Opress, when he's looking for his brother, who was assumed dead, Darth Maul, that's where he found, the beaten down, or shall I say, the surviving Darth Maul, who was, existing there, not living there, I guess, but existing there. But that happened on Lado Minor in the Clone Wars episode of the final season of the season 4 of the Clone Wars. 4th season of the Clone Wars series. Okay, the next one is Florum, Planet Florum, and that had a very arid desert and canyons. It was covered with its surface was arid desert and canyons, and that appeared in the Clone Wars episodes Dooku Captured, and as far as many others, it appeared in many other Clone Wars episodes. The next planet is Gamorra. That should sound very familiar. The Gamorreans. You remember the Gamorrean guards in episode 6, Return of the Jedi? They were the guards in Jabba's palace on Tatooine. Those big, heavy-set creatures, short, heavy-set creatures. Well, they're the Gamorreans, where they're from the planet Gamorra. And they come from a very agrarian surface-type world, type planet. That's what Gamorra is like. The next one is Klatooine, Klatonians. They were, remember, they were some of the military best description is, they were the force or military force for the Hutt clans and the Hutt crime lords. But Klatooinian its surface is very arid desert and savannas. So that's the primary surface of Klatooine. Munilist, I mentioned the Munes before. Munilist, were the home planet of the Moons, and you remember the Moons were the International Banking Clan, and they were one of the ones who sided with Dooku when in the Confederacy for Independent Systems. They're very, very thin, very long heads. Those were the Munes, and they come from the planet Munilist. And the planet Munilist surface was forest, plains, and mountains. That was the primary surface of the Munilist. The final one that I want to mention, very important indeed, could be used for a future blog for Star Wars. But I want to talk about it just for a second. Moraband, formerly known as Korriban, but retitled Moraband for the Clone Wars series. Moraband is an ancient world from the Outer Rim territory, the most ancient world from the Outer Rim territory, because it was the home world of the ancient Sith race, going back thousands of years ago. And its surface was very strange because it was covered in mountains and red sands. That's why it's very dark and red on that planet, because it's mountains and red sands. It's the surface of the home planet of Moraband, which was the home planet of the ancient Sith. But the Sith appear in that, and it also appears, even though it's Korriban, when it's formerly named Korriban, appears a lot in the expanded universe material. It does appear as renamed Moraband in the Clone Wars episode Sacrifice, which was the final episode of Season 6, the Lost Missions episodes of the Clone Wars series, in which Yoda visits the ancient world of the ancient home world of the Sith, and sees that spirit or that vision of Darth Bane, who created the Order of Two. So he learns about the secrets of the Sith Order in that episode. But that was the final episode of Season 6, The Lost Missions of the Clone Wars series, and technically the last final episode of the Clone Wars series, period. But that's where Moraband. But that's a topic to explore later in a later blog, because there's probably a lot more I can go into about Moraband, or formerly known as Korriban. Now keep in mind, the Moraband and Korriban, even though it's known that George Lucas wanted to change the name for the Clone Wars series, because primarily over the centuries, over the millennia, Moraban and Korriban have changed their names, so just like certain names have changed, just like you have in Turkey. Istanbul used to be Constantinople, now it's known as Istanbul. So names can change. So probably currently, by the time of the movies in the Clone Wars series, that planet is known as Moraban, but it used to be referred to Korriban probably thousands of years ago by the ancient Sith. So it's a non-contradiction in continuity, really. So you can easily frame it in the continuity of the Star Wars universe. But that concludes my sampling, even though it was a large sampling. That concludes my sampling of planets in the Outer Rim territories, of the Outer Rim. Let's go on to the next space. Now keep in mind that when we get to the Outer Rim, after the Outer Rim, that is the official civilized section of the galaxy of the Galactic Republic. Now that hasn't stopped the furthering of exploration and charting of the galaxy, but now we're really getting into territory of space, which is somewhat charted, but it's still pioneer. It's still it's frontier. It's frontier space. And the first area I want to get after area of the galaxy I want to get into that's after the Outer Rim is wild space. Wild space is an area of the galaxy where it is also known as the frontier. Wild space was the frontier of galactic society, separating the known parts of the galaxy from the unknown regions. One of Emperor Palpatine's last acts was to open up much of the region to more expansive exploration. Interesting enough, again, one of Emperor Palpatine's more positive acts during his regime, even though that doesn't excuse his tyranny. Wild space differed from the unknown regions in that some of wild space has been explored, though not extensively. The unknown regions remained mysterious. So, the last two parts I want to be talking about is wild space and the unknown regions. The difference between them is wild space has been somewhat charted and even explored, whereas the unknown regions totally unexplored. And even though few planets charted, but widely uncharted and unexplored. Hardly explored, shall I say. Let's start with the first planet, which is very significant. Kamino. That's the homeworld of the Chemonians, who had a very advanced cloning techniques. It was a watery world, again, a world covered in oceans. And it was the home planet, like I said, of the Chemonians. They weren't members of the Republic. And they weren't members, and basically, but they did have an advanced society and civilization, and advanced technology and cloning, and they were the ones who cloned Jango Fett, the Mandalorian known as Jango Fett, because he was a strong warrior, known as most skilled warrior with fighting and technology and skills and stuff like that. So they used his DNA to create the army of the clone army for the Republic that was secretly created. And it was a world. Kamino was a world that was covered. It's interesting because that planet was sort of in wild space. It was hidden because remember that Obi-Wan heard of that planet and was trying to search for that planet because that was the origin of the bounty hunter who was trying to assassinate Padme, and he was trying to uncover that mystery of who was trying to assassinate her. And it led him to Kamino, but he couldn't find Kamino in the Jedi records because it had been erased by a Jedi. To hide that planet, and for obvious reasons that we know now, because of the clone army that was being created there on that planet. But if you remember, when Obi-Wan was searching for it, he said it should be right there in the south of Rishi Maze. Rishi Maze was one of the 7 satellite galaxies for the Star Wars galaxy. But he said the Kamino should be right there south of this Rishi Maze, but he couldn't find it. So the Rishi Maze was north of the wild. It was the satellite galaxy that was north of wild space territory. So Kamino was one of those planets, and that's where the clone army was being created. Sifo-Dyas, prior to the events of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, started that before Count Dooku murdered him. And probably it was Count Dooku or either Darth Sidious, who most likely Count Dooku, because he was known as a Jedi, whereas Palpatine, nobody knew he had Force power, so he wasn't trained as a Jedi like Dooku was before he converted to a Sith. So most likely Dooku had the most unpresumed access to the Jedi records, and that's why he erased, his last time on Coruscant, he erased the records and the Jedi records of Kamino's existence. So the clone army would be hidden from the Republic and the Jedi Order until the time that it was necessary to reveal their existence, which was in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Let's go on to the next planet, Teth. Teth was a planet. It was a planet that was primarily inhabited by humans, but had jungles and plains. That was its primary surface, and the appearance in that was in the Clone Wars movie, and also the Clone Wars episode Hunt for Zero, because that's ultimately where, well, first of all, that's where the Separatists had a movement there, which they were, when they kidnapped Jabba the Hutt's son. That's where they were hiding out on that planet, and that's where the clones army, the Republic army, with the Jedi, had to go there to rescue Jabba's son. But also, it was the last place in the Clone Wars episode, the Hunt for Zero. That's where Zero finally made it to, where he was assassinated by one of his love interests. But Zero was killed, if you remember that episode. But Teth was the planet. That was the planet in the wild space region that those events took place at. Let's go on to the next one, which was Mortis. Now, Mortis is interesting. Now, Mortis is, even though I'm going to refer to it as a planet, it's very strange. Okay, because the planet was enclosed in a monolith, and it was a conduit. It was a conduit of the Force, and it appeared in the Clone Wars episodes, The Overlords, Altar of Mortis, and The Ghost of Mortis. It was the three-part, trilogy from season 3 of the Clone Wars series, and those became very famous episodes because they explored deeply the mythology of the ancient knowledge of the Force, and which I'm going to do. I'm definitely doing a future blog, but I want to do some more research to come up with more solid opinions on that, because that sort of controversy and various ideas of what Mortis is. Is it reality inside that planet, or is it sort of a vision or so? Because if you remember, in the beginning, Obi-Wan and Anakin and Ahsoka, they visit Mortis because they get that signal from deep space, from the wild, wild space. They get this. They get the signal, which they recognize comes from the times of the Jedi. It's a signal that comes from a signal that comes from the Jedi Order, but from thousands of years ago. It's not a modern signal. It's a signal that's cast in a language from the ancient Jedis. And they go there to explore it, and they get caught in this monolith, and they visit this world. And this world is almost like another dimension. Because remember, when they come out of it, almost no time in the galaxy, reality has in the galaxy has passed. But I'm going to save that for a future blog, because it's very important information, very intriguing information about the nature of the Force and some mythology behind that. So Mortis is located within that region of wild space. And the last planet I'm going to talk about for wild space is Gadavo. It's a planet inhabited by Zygerians. Its surface is volcanic and very thick smog atmosphere. And that appears in the Clone Wars episodes Slaves of the Republic and Escape from Gadavo, which is in the 4th season of the Clone Wars series. But I'll let you watch those episodes to get the info on that, what happens on that planet. Okay, that concludes my section for wild space. The last section I'm going to cover, the final section, is known as the unknown regions. Let's talk about the unknown regions. The term unknown regions most commonly referred to the large unexplored region, which some interpreted to have been outside the plane of the galactic disk, which was largely dominated by the Chiss ascendancy. The unknown regions was comprised only of a few billion stars, out of a galactic total of 400 billion. There was a lack of reliable hyperspace routes through the region. The unknown regions designation included uncharted areas in dense nebula, globular clusters, and the galactic halo. The Galactic Empire launched many expeditions to discover and conquer the unknown regions section. Past the region's outer edge, including the seven dwarf satellite galaxies, was the hyperspace disturbance beyond the edge of the galaxy. So when we get to the outer section of the unknown regions, remember the unknown regions is the furthest part of the Star Wars galaxy. That's the furthest edge of the Star Wars galaxy. When we get to that edge of that disk, the edge of that area, that's where we encounter a lot of those seven dwarf satellite galaxies that I had mentioned before. Of course, one of them being the Rishi maze, and but outside of that is outside the galaxy. That's in the far outer space outside the galaxy, where you then can travel the millions of light years in distance in between the various galaxies of the universe. And it was known as a hyperspace disturbance beyond the edge of the galaxy, and that's what prevented a lot of ships from traveling outside the galaxy. Of course, I'm going to get to that because I think there have been successful missions outside the galaxy, as well as alien races visiting the Star Wars galaxy, which I will get to. And of course, in the Abbadon's flight project, the Jedi's masters had found a way to get beyond the hyperspace disturbance, so they can explore other galaxies, and leave the galaxy and explore other galaxies. But essentially, that is the unknown regions. The unknown regions, again, unlike wild space, there's been a few planets charted. A lot of them have been during the time of Emperor Palpatine's reign, the charting of some of those planets in the unknown regions. But it's mostly uncharted and unexplored, and hardly any of them have been inhabited or civilized by humans or alien races from the Galactic Republic, and none of them are members of the Galactic Republic. The main race, civilized race, that controls that region is Chiss, but the Chiss are not members of the Galactic Republic. But they are the only intelligent, civilized race that rule that region. But anyway, let's go with a few planets that we do. I have a few planets that we do know. A couple of them are from the Star Wars expanded universe. But the first one is Ilum. Ilum appeared in the Clone Wars episodes The Gathering. If you remember the episodes from the 5th season of the Clone Wars series, where Yoda and Ahsoka take the younglings, the Padawan younglings, to train them, become Padawans, so they go through a rite of passage and learning how to find the crystal, so they can create their own lightsabers. Well, the planet Ilum, that's where they go to, that ice planet in Ilum, where they find that crystal. That is the place in the unknowns. That's the planet in the unknown regions, which the Jedi do visit, because that's their rite of passage. That's where they take their younglings for a rite of passage. But it's an ice planet, and obviously has a lot of crystals, because the Jedi's use those crystals, are able to find those crystals to use to create their lightsabers, for the power of their lightsabers. So that appears in the episode The Gathering from the 5th season of the Clone Wars series. The rest of the 3 planets that I'm going to mention or from the Star Wars Expanded Universe, because, like I said, in the 6 movies and also the Clone Wars series, other than Illume, we really don't know or deal with too much of the unknown regions. Most of it is talked about or referred to in the Expanded Universe, Legends, which is now referred to Legends. So the question remains is how much will this consist, or will they carry over into the new canon, or official canon, which I like to think that most of this will, or could. Anyway, let's deal with the first planet. I mean, not the first planet for the unknown regions listed, but the first planet from the Expanded Universe, shall I say, is Scylla. Scylla in the unknown regions. That's the home planet. Remember, the Chiss. That's the home planet of the Chiss. But remember, the Chiss have an ascendancy, just like the Galactic Republic, which they inhabit thousands of worlds. Well, the Chiss inhabit thousands of planets within the unknown regions, known as the Chiss ascendancy. But Scylla is their home planet, which they are from. And Scylla is covered in glaciers and snow wasteland. But that is the home planet of the Chiss, essentially. And if you know the Chiss race, the blue-skinned, red eyes, their body structure is made for that kind of environment. The next one is, if I'm pronouncing this, Luik, and that's the home planet of the Saruk race. And they're reptiles. They look like velociraptors. That's what they remind me of. And the planet is very humid. It's very hot and humid. It's a jungle planet. That's its surface. And the reason why I mention that, because that, if you remember, it's a true background. They were the race that were invading the galaxy right after the defeat of the Empire and the death of Emperor Palpatine. So I mention that because they're from the unknown regions. The Saruk race is from the unknown regions, and their home planet is Luik. And the last planet that I want to mention, which is very interesting and almost gets into fantasy in a lot of ways, is Zonoma Zikat, if I'm pronouncing that right. And the reason why I say that is because it's a living, sentient world. And it appeared in the Expanded Universe from the Clone Wars era, or prior to the Clone Wars era, after Episode 1, The Phantom Menace appeared in that era, where Obi-Wan was training Anakin to be a Jedi and took him to that world for a mission. And he discovered, one of the Jedi's masters who had left the galaxy. There was an alien race that was visited there and left the galaxy. And when they left, that Jedi left with them. And from the reasons, which we learn more about why, in the New Jedi Order series of the EU, with the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. But that planet was the seed of the original Yuuzhan Vong homeworld. So it's interesting that that planet's connected, and it's a living, sentient world, which, if you know anything about the Yuuzhan Vong, that's what their technology is based on, and the essence of their religion and their society. But that was Zonoma Zikat, living, sentient world planet. So pretty much that concludes. It's not a whole lot, like I said, because most of those planets are not even dealt with in the 6 movies or the Clone Wars, and a few of them are dealt with on the few planets from the unknown regions are dealt with in the Expanded Universe. But pretty much that concludes my blog there for the Star Wars Galaxy. It's very long. I know I did a very long blog. There's a lot of detail. I hope I did justice. I hope I did justice for this topic, because it's very survey. It's like a survey course. So I had to just gleam over a lot of information for the Star Wars Galaxy, just to give you an overview of what the Star Wars Galaxy is about, and give you samplings of the planets for each of the sectors and each sections of the Star Wars Galaxy. So hopefully I did a somewhat decent, satisfactory job on that, and that'll be a standoff or a point that I can go from there for other blogs that I create in the future for Star Wars Mythology. So I figured I'd start off, today's new series of Star Wars Mythology with that topic, which I have concluded now, and I will let it go there, because I know this blog is long, and it'll be over 2 hours watching it, and I hope that you have enjoyed watching it, especially if you watched the whole thing. I know it's been long. I appreciate you watching this. I hope that you have enjoyed this, and it's been very informative and helpful in informing you of the stories and mythology and information on the Star Wars galaxy. But anyway, that concludes that. I ask you to join me next month for next month's blog on for February, as I plan to do with Doctor Who Mythology on the nature of time travel, which that'll be very interesting. But we'll wait till you see that blog to get into the topics of time travel. Can time be changed, and or is it infinitely locked, or can we change time, and what does it mean when we talk about changing history? But I'll get into that when we deal with that when the Doctor Who Mythology on the nature of time travel. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one on the Star Wars Galaxy. If you did enjoy this video, I ask you to please subscribe to my channel so you can get all the latest updates, especially for future blogs. And I want to bid you a good day, and thank you again for watching this video, and may the Force be with you.